All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to another White Rabbit video. Tonight we are going over GameStop and GME as quarter four approaches and the end of the fiscal year results are in. Quarter four is the biggest quarter for GME, and I thought it'd be good to talk about it a little bit and speculate on what we might be able to expect and where price might be going. And also what opportunities might be presented as far as potential trades. And to dig into that a little bit, I would like to start with what analysts are expecting here for earnings. So let's take a look at what they are expecting for this quarter four and what analysts maybe have been expecting in the prior quarters as well. So we can do a little bit of compare and contrast, which could help us create and build a thesis so that we can maybe execute a proper trade on good risk reward. So to begin, let's take a look. So TradingView here says that analysts are estimating for earnings to be 0.08 EPS and then the revenue to be $1.48 billion. Now, this absolutely caught my attention because the estimates are pretty low. For revenue, I can understand the decrease there, and I'll go over that. But first, I do really want to go over the estimated EPS. The EPS being 0.08 really catches my attention just because it just seems so low. And if you look at what GameStop's accomplished in the prior quarters, the past few years, you've seen significant improvements year over year in EPS, right? We're seeing that transition from burning tons of cash to slowly working their way into profitability. And that's where we are, right? Profitable. And 0.08, if we just go back to the previous quarter four, what happened was they reported a 0.22 EPS. And for analysts not to project something in the ballpark around those numbers does make me wonder, are we kind of expecting, do we want a big beat? Is that going to have a result or reflection in price action after hours? And that could potentially be the case. Now, that being said, I would like to mention that there has been numerous occasions, not just GameStop, but several stocks in the market that have an excellent earnings, whether it's the EPS beat, revenue beat, or even both. Sometimes the market does price these things in already, and unless there's a huge, enormous catalyst, price could either trade sideways or still market makers' favorite, try to screw over the most people and still drive the price down. So how can we approach a good trade, right? And that's what I'm trying to lead into. But before I do get there, we'll also take a look at revenue. Now, last year, revenue was 1.79 billion, right? That is what was reported. And I know that GameStop has been trimming down the fat, and that's how we've been able to transition into some really good profitability. But a lot of their trimming was done. I'm not saying it's completely finished. A lot of it was completed last year. So I don't necessarily see such a drastic change in revenue, especially for quarter four. So to cut that by essentially $300 million, especially when there's a huge deal like the PSA partnership, I think that's going to help stabilize and generate more revenue. So I made a post on Twitter X, a little earlier, and I really think that this is going to be one of those quarters that's just going to see a tremendous beat. And I think one of the last times you saw such a big beat in both, right? I mean, sure, we saw this quarter here, quarter one, see a really nice EPS beat, and then we missed on the revenue, but then dilution was announced. So we did see a drop in price. Quarter three, we saw a beautiful beat in EPS, revenue miss, no announcement on dilution, and price actually traded flat for a little bit there. It did go up in after hours, up and down and everything. Traded flat, and then it slowly started making that break out upwards. And then lastly, we'll take a look. So a couple misses here and everything. But the last time we really saw a beat in both was quarter one of 2023. And even that wasn't that big of a beat. You saw a little bit of a beat here in EPS, small beat in revenue. And I think this is going to be one of the bigger beats. And I don't think we're going to see some of those crazy shenanigans, right? Which quarter was that? I think that was back... It was one of those quarters where they were expecting... It might have been this one, actually, where estimates were for this quarter four last year, was like 0.18. And then every week they started raising up the EPS. They're like, okay, we expect 0.20, we expect 0.24. And then like the day before, estimates came in at 29, and they're like, oh, they missed. Smack the price down. One of the craziest things I've ever seen. Let me know if you've seen anything like that before in the stock market, scam market sometimes, right? That's some crazy shit. Let me take a quick sip here. But essentially, so when I'm talking, right, about a pretty big beat here, again, sometimes companies need much more than that, a catalyst, right? And we could speculate some potential catalysts. I do tend to think that GameStop seeing a big beat in EPS and a relatively decent beat, it doesn't have to be too big, but a pretty solid beat in revenue, which like I said, it hasn't seen in quite some time, that could have a positive impact in price, at least in the short term. Now, any catalyst after that, whether the cash has been invested, that's the catalyst that we're sort of waiting for, right? Wall Street has not priced in anything like that. They're barely even pricing in the cash at hand right now, right? And the potential that GameStop has with Ryan Cohen able to invest that cash however he wants. And we've seen what a successful record he has too. So we'll see what happens in that aspect. Now, as far as the chart goes, right? We'll do a little TA. Ooh, Rabbit doing technical analysis. So as far as TA goes, I mean, we did close multiple days under the 200-day moving average, right? So this is the 200-day moving average, this little green line here, or teal, whatever you want to call it. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days closed below that. So price is being sustained under that, and it could create more negative downward pressure unless we try to flip that back into support as soon as possible, which could be likely. We are seeing futures open up pretty bright green, especially after the whole crypto thing that happened quite literally today. Things are kind of turning into a little more of a bullish momentum. And that could have a reflection on GameStop's price action as well. So if we could flip this back into support, then we can kind of work our way up, get these bands a little bit tighter. And as we approach March earnings, right, then we could maybe get that pop upwards. But we're going to have to see. And as far as risk reward goes, this is where I need to take a look at my phone real quick, because I want to take a look at the current implied volatility. Now, trust me, I'm a huge believer in the company. I think buying and holding shares is one of the safest, best bets in my opinion. But I'd like to add a little bit more risk in there, right? Because I want to try to accumulate as many long-term shares as I can, and I'm okay with the risk. You don't have to do that, or you can. It's your finances. I'm not giving financial advice. I'm just talking from my perspective and what I would like to do. Just needed to get that out there. All right. So implied volatility right now on GameStop is 79.9. So when it comes to options, that is actually still relatively low for GameStop, especially as we are approaching earnings, right? I would say we're about 3 weeks away. So naturally, what does typically happen, it doesn't have to be all the time, right? But what typically happens is that IV does tend to increase. So basically, let's say, so price is at 25.04. Let's say price does stay around these levels up until heading into earnings, right? 3 weeks from now. IV, I would expect to go over that 100 point mark, right? You would see contracts be, if not just as expensive, but more expensive with higher than 100 IV. And I guess this is what I'm trying to articulate. This is what I'm trying to highlight here as far as the point of view for risk reward, right? So risk is a little bit of that downside, maybe not as much of an IV increase as I expect, and seeing some of that theta decay. And then also, if you were to holding into earnings, right? There could be dilution announced, or maybe the beat isn't as big as what I'm personally predicting. However, let's say there is no gap up, or maybe we're teetering right on the edge of this 200-day moving average where it could be a good entry. You have from this entry here, flipping this from resistance to support to essentially whatever happens to the upside. So if price also goes up $1 or $2 and IV increases as well, you could see some pretty good gains, whether it's 20%, 30%, 40%. And then you could always take profits before the earnings call actually happens, add shares. I'm just throwing ideas out there. So I guess those are some of my thoughts as far as these risk reward setups. Sorry, I'm seeing someone comment, I'm too dumb for options. And that, I mean, you don't have to call yourself dumb. I mean, it really is okay. Because as far as long-term goes, I think GameStop really is heading in the right direction. And the outlook for the rest of the year and the next 5, 10, however many years, I really think that there's going to be some extremely bullish price action. It could just be a little difficult to time when, right? What's the exact date we're going back to 50? What's the exact date we're going back to 75? However, we could look at what's happened in the past. Maybe we could look at certain technicals and stuff, right, to give us a better idea, the options chain, where we might be able to pick up on some of that momentum to keep driving us forward, or maybe down a little bit. Now, overall, I would like to personally start entering a call position for an IV play, maybe a little bit of a price action play, and then let's see what the sentiment's like, right? If we're not seeing Ryan Cohen, Roaring Kitty tweet, maybe there's some really bearish sentiment out there and price is kind of declining or staying flat, I might take the risk and hang on to some calls, maybe even sell cash secured puts. As we approach earnings, I think I'm gonna wait maybe 1 or 2 more weeks. If price is, let's say, still 25, I might sell a couple contracts, cash secured puts at that $25 range, because the premium, I might be able to immediately collect $100 or $200 premium, and then maybe even pick up the shares at $25 as well. Yeah, so there is a comment here. Obviously super bullish long term with Cohen on our side, but perhaps it still goes a little bit downhill for a bit more time. Depends on the earnings. So this is kind of what I wanted to actually talk about, right? Ideally, for me, right, I play it a little, I play it right. I'm not speaking with certainty because I get things wrong all the time. I am far from perfect, but ideally I play the earnings call. We ride up to 30 or maybe even a little bit above 30, make some decent gains, do a little bit of a options call sell off, and then see price sort of drive back down. And if we could get back under around 23, I think there's gonna be some pretty big signals, some demand, because I think that is starting to head towards that deep value area, especially $20. I think 20 is like the new $10, and I think that's where we'll see a lot of calls come in, a lot of demand, and potentially a gamma squeeze, especially that gap fill around 1750. I don't know if we'll get that. That's for another video, another discussion, but you know, it's very possible, and that could be the start of something very special, right? Start tricking retail, some other traders into thinking, oh, this is very bearish. Maybe signal some bears coming in, shorting it, maybe a bunch of puts, and then boom, just start squeezing all of them. So like I said, we'll save that for another time if it comes. But yeah, we're gonna kind of see. I will update maybe a position or two if I do make an entry. And yeah, let's pay attention to how we gap up, because with futures greed and everything and what's going on with crypto, I would expect a bit or maybe even like a big gap up, and we could potentially get back over this 200-day moving average, turn that into support, and yeah, that could be a good entry. And then we'll see what happens as we start getting closer and closer to earnings. Now, we don't have a definite date yet, but I would think it's around that March 20 to 25 date, right around March OPEX. And another thing I actually will mention, and I'll kind of speed things up a little bit and end it, but take a look at the monthly chart. I mean, back here, after all that, look at this trading sideways for months after this incredible price action, right? Nothing. And then finally we break out. And then off of little volume, look how big this bearish engulfing is. And then we gap down, right? We did slightly close below, we closed the month below the 200, but look where the price is here. What does that look like to you? $25, right? So what used to be resistance is becoming support. So that $25 area, just keep that in mind, because we could start making a trend back up, right? I don't know how long, how many months, how many weeks, days, years. Years might be a little extreme, but it could take a little bit, but I think we could start working our way up. And I keep saying the last thing. The last thing I'll say is, historically, March has been a pretty good month. I think last year, March was not the best month, but after the sneeze, March has been a pretty good month for GME. And the only time March actually wasn't a good month was pretty much towards the end of the downtrend, right? This is it. Yeah, March. So pretty much after the end of the downtrend here on this cycle, and then we broke out, you know, we had April, but April is also a bad month. So I think, and you know, we'll reassess things as more data is presented in front of us. I think March will be rather bullish. April will go back to being a little bear, maybe some dips, but then May is also historically a good month. So couple things to keep in mind. If you have any questions or maybe some comments, feel free to leave them. I'm going to upload this on Twitter and everything, probably where you're watching right now. And yeah, if you made it through this whole video as well, feel free to leave some rocket ship emojis, maybe comment GameStop as well. I'd appreciate that a lot. But yeah, let's see how futures or how overnight trading opens. Maybe see if there's a cat tweet or something. But yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in. That's the end of the video. You guys have a good night. I'm seeing a nice big long, I'm not gonna say that, GameStop, the fucking value. All right, good night everybody, cheers.